Okay, 2:25 p.m. Back to the presentation here. We do have three more presenters. We have Elise Desjarlais is up next. Elise works for the Lake to Lake CISMA. That's the Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area. It's called Lake to Lake because of the counties she covers, and I'm sure Elise is going to touch on that. I can see those counties in the picture here on my screen. So, but yeah, so I will turn it over to Elise to let her take over on her presentation. So thank you very much. Elise, go ahead when you're ready.
Perfect. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate the introduction. So again, my name is Elise Desjarlais. I'm the coordinator for the Lake to Lake Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area. If you can look down in that bottom right corner, we service the Central Upper Peninsula. So the service counties are Marquette, Alger, Delta, and Schoolcraft. And my slides aren't advancing. That's fun. Hang on just a second, everybody. I'm sorry. I don't know why it's doing this. Huh. All right, Matt, can you see it again now? Are we good on advancing?
Yes, I can see your next slide.
Perfect, thank you.
Of Michigan.
All right. So jumping back in, I wanted to give everybody a brief overview as to what CISMAs are, because it might be a new acronym for some people on the webinar this afternoon. And so these are cooperative groups that are able to work at landscape scales across the state of Michigan and other states as well. But I'm highlighting Michigan because Michigan is fully covered by CISMAs. This map is actually a little bit outdated. Some of these really larger blocks of color have now broken off into what I would think is a more manageable size area to have their CISMA servicing. But what it is these partnership groups of, local nonprofits, there's state organizations, federal government agencies. And what that allows us to do is to work and manage invasive species across all these different landscapes. A great example is Hiawatha National Forest. It's national forest land, it's a federal government agency, and they can only work within the boundaries and the jurisdictions of Hiawatha National Forest. Invasive species and plants and animals alike do not really know where your property boundary is. So once that invasive species infestation potentially crosses that line, and it's an issue for maybe the private landowner right on the other side of that line, Hiawatha can't do anything about it, the landowner's not sure what to do about it, that's where the CISMA can come together, create this partnership to work across those boundary lines and really work at a landscape scale to manage any invasive species issues that arise in the area. So they're really cool organizations that have a lot of potential, can offer a lot of assistance and be a really great resource regionally for any invasive species issues. So to jump in a little bit and zoom back into the Lake to Lake service area, as I mentioned earlier, we are Marquette, Alger, Delta, and Schoolcraft counties. So if you're a landowner, logger, forester, manager of any sort really within that area, and you have an invasive species concern, please feel free to reach out. We're happy to help. So some of you may have seen this graphic before, but just to give a very brief overview, what exactly is invasive species? And so invasive species are species that are both non-native and causing harm. And that harm can be to the environment, to the economy, and even to human health, but it has to be causing harm in some way. And to illustrate that example really, really well, I always go with this fun graphic of, is it invasive? And on the left-hand side here, you can see an apple tree. Apples aren't actually native to North America, but they're certainly not causing any harm. In fact, we very much value our apple trees, our apple crops. It's a good economic resource. It's a good health food. All those fun things that make it non-native, but we like it. It's good. It's okay. And it's also not pushing out our native ecosystems. On the right-hand side is our good old friend, the emerald ash borer. It is non-native. It is also invasive because it is certainly causing harm. It is destroying native habitats with our ash trees. It's taking away that resource. It's taking away that recreation value, and it's taking away that native ecosystem that is in place. And so being both non-native and causing harm, emerald ash borer is something that is considered invasive. So I just gave a couple examples of harm, but some other ones that might illustrate this point pretty well is any displacement of native species. And with that displacement, there can be a decrease in the diversity of habitats for wildlife. You might lose breeding grounds, you might lose, those nesting sites of birds and other critters that are very beneficial to the environment. It can inhibit the regeneration of important tree species, and that's certainly a concern when we're talking about forest management. And with that inhibiting of regeneration, we can alter ecosystem processes. If you're not getting your conifer cover coming back where you need it to, and your streams are needing that conifer cover for that shade, you're really looking at a really larger scale problem than just tree regeneration. You're altering entire ecosystems sometimes. I'll give an example later in this PowerPoint of human health hazards that can sometimes come along with invasive species. And lastly, invasive species really can actually see an economic toll. And specifically, a really great example is aquatic invasive species and some of the wetland plants. It can really decrease outdoor recreation, experiences, and can potentially be disruptive enough that people stop visiting an area or utilizing that area in a way that's affecting the economy there. So really, what can be done about invasive species? Once they're here, well, they're here, and we're going to have to definitely use management tools and prioritization tools to help us manage the actual invasive infestation. But working cooperatively, and the goal of the CISMA is to work cooperatively, can really, really help in that management and that prioritization. That cooperation includes collaborating with partners and stakeholders, and identifying and reporting those high threat invasive species that you encounter. And lastly, we want to stop the spread as much as we can. So getting that resource and those educational materials out to the correct partners and the correct stakeholders to let them know what they can do is a huge step forward in cooperatively managing those presences. So one really great way is to identify and report to the best of your ability, and that can really start with just being aware of some of the really high stakes invasives that may be in your region. And so that's what I'm going to try to get through today, talking with some of the species that will be present in the Lake to Lake CISMA service area. And so after this presentation, hopefully you'll know some of those invasives that are relevant in the Central Upper Peninsula, and then knowing where to go for help if you are finding these species. I'm going to highlight MISIN as an acronym for the Midwest Invasive Species Information Network. They have really great training modules and ID tips on their platform. You can always reach out to me and to other local CISMA partners. And as Simeon had up, we have wonderful Forest Resource Division, invasive species biologists, forest health specialists. Those resources are always there for you when you're looking for some assistance. And so this is the landing page for the Midwest Invasive Species Information Network. They do actually have an app that can go right onto a smartphone, and it's really helpful. I found it especially helpful in for myself to realize where some reports are coming in from, because you can actually make a report and confirm an identification of a species that you're finding while you're out, in the woods. So this app can go right on your phone. You can hit report right from that app, and then it sends me an email that says, hey, so-and-so sent a report, you want to go check it out? And then I can go out to that site where it was reported and either confirm a presence or say, nope, we're all good, false alarm. And that's the best part, is when it's a false alarm. But if it is there, it's really helpful to know it's there. And this allows people to help be those eyes in the woods for potential new invasives. And so moving into just a couple species I wanted to highlight with this workshop this afternoon, some species to watch for in forested environments and how they relate to, specifically being in the forestry industry. And so those species will be garlic mustard. Wild parsnip is actually finding its way into different roadsides and different openings. So I'll hit on that. We're always on the lookout for hemlock woolly adelgid. And then I also want to hit on non-native Phragmites during this presentation as well. So garlic mustard is an annual, and technically it's a biannual, sorry about that. It has rapid growth in mostly hardwood understories, although we have seen it in many other growth habitats. But this species can very easily outcompete other growth. It seeds out like crazy every year. And so that seed bank is in that very top layer of soil and can get disturbed by just about anything coming through, whether it's a deer, a dog, a human, a bike, or a piece of logging equipment. Anything can really pick up that seed bank very, very easily and spread it very easily. So decontamination is key if you're seeing this growth in the understory. And this particular plant has a chemical production from its root system that will inhibit the growth of other species. So that's what gives it that competitive edge and makes it so invasive. And so if you see in this top picture here, you know, if you're looking at this hardwood understory and you're hoping for some regeneration in that understory, you're not going to see it. Unfortunately, the garlic mustard will inhibit the growth of just about anything else, including new tree species. So it can be detrimental to reforesting someplace and managing for young forest and then those openings that we're hoping to get. This is a snapshot also from the MISN webpage, and you can actually search by species to see the different locations of different species. And so if you're looking, hey, I'm going to be out next to Eben Junction there next week to get started on a project, what's in that area? Well, you can look and get these snapshots and see what's been reported there. And so if you're out in that area, you can certainly see that that is a hot spot for garlic mustard. And so it is very close to the town of Marquette. We're finding it more and more also up in our northwestern locations up in Powell Township near Big Bay there. So it's not terribly widespread yet. It is widespread in the sense that it is throughout the whole UP. It is in various different growth habitats. But things like that really big hotspot in Marquette, we know that a lot of those are in a lot of people's backyards. It's in a lot of recreation areas like the city parks. And so it's not something that I'm all of a sudden worried about being maybe out in the woods. However, the fact that we're seeing more and more pop up near Big Bay, and some of those sites are actually really far out in the woods, and we're like, whoa, how did they get here? And those are much more concerning, and we're trying to figure out what maybe are the vectors that are transporting them up that way. So know before you go is always a huge slogan I'm a fan of. So if you're planning projects and you're planning some management, taking a look at some of these distribution maps can really go a long way in preparing for that. So I wanted to bring up wild parsnip. As I had mentioned a few slides ago, roadsides and openings and trailheads seems to be where this is popping up. It really, really likes big sunny areas. And so what we're finding is sometimes when we're creating new openings where there was a lot of shade previously, maybe keeping this under control, this is a very aggressive colonizer of those sunny areas, and it's moving very quickly into anywhere that has new sunlight. And so if you're really opening up a canopy and this is maybe nearby, I would certainly keep an eye out for it in your monitoring for the couple years when you're looking at your regeneration in the area. And this particular plant is one of our examples of a human health hazard. If you see the lovely top left photo, this plant actually produces a phytophototoxin in its sap. And what that will do is when the plant is crushed and sap comes in contact with your skin and you're in daylight, it has to have UV rays hit it. It has this photochemical reaction that basically causes the equivalent of an acid burn on your skin. So definitely not something you really want to mess around with. If you see this plant, report it right away. Definitely, like I said, keep an eye out for it in maybe new openings, and be aware of if it's around you, because not only is it potentially being spread, but it can also have the potential to harm you. Wild parsnip seems to be clustered with our roadways, and Certainly, we know that it's an issue on a lot of roadsides, specifically the 41 corridor, and a little bit on the 28 corridor as well in the Central Upper Peninsula. It's moving very rapidly with roadways, and as I mentioned, they're big roadways. It's like our highways and our much bigger roads, but we're also starting to find it spreading down ATV trails and in old open pastures. And as I had mentioned, potentially moving into some places that are seeing much more sunlight than previously. And so just keeping an eye out for it, knowing where it is, and certainly keeping an eye out, knowing where it is for this one. So we're protecting ourselves, but also protecting our habitats. So touching on hemlock woolly adelgid, I'm not going to focus so much on the identification and everything in my talk, since in the next talk given by Terry, she's going to go into detail on that. But I do want to highlight what's been done in the Lake to Lake service area. And so currently we still haven't found it in the UP, which everybody's breathing a sigh of relief for now. It is present in the lower peninsula of Michigan and moving a little bit outside of the initial findings, which I'm sure Terry will touch on. It will be attacking our eastern hemlock trees. That is the host tree of this insect. And once it gets into a site, you can potentially have the decimation of hemlock stands if it goes undetected and untreated for long enough, as we can see in that top picture there. It'll look like these little fuzzy fluffs almost on hemlock needles, and definitely something to keep an eye out for. What we've been doing in the Lake to Lake service area is through a Michigan invasive species grant program. We've been able to conduct wintertime surveys, which is when you will see those fuzzy white ovisacs on the trees. And so in the winters of 2019, 2020, and then this last winter of 2020 into 2021, we have been doing surveys all along the Lake Michigan shoreline, as that has been prioritized by the state as to where to begin searching for it. And you can see we've done a couple surveys up on the Superior shoreline as well, just in some high priority areas. And as mentioned, there's been no HWA detected to date, but we're always keeping our eye out. And as you can see, we've surveyed a good deal of shoreline along the Lake Michigan shoreline in the UP for it. It's not something we want to have show up here, and if and when it does show up here, we want to find it very quickly so we can get all of the boots on the ground action that we can allocated towards treating and containing it. So with hemlock woolly adelgid and all invasive species, decontamination is key. Knowing where it is the first step with any invasive, but if you think you've been in an area that might have had it, you should definitely be decontaminating equipment, clothing, anything that may carry the insects during the time of year when they're moving around. And if anything looks suspicious to you, you might see the many lookalikes, but report anything suspicious. It's better to always be able to go out and say, no, that wasn't it, rather than leave something go and potentially be ignoring a problem that would be here. And Terry will definitely be hitting more on how to make a report if you do think you've seen hemlock woolly adelgid somewhere, but take photos, a GPS point, and report it to MDAR, to miss into your local conservation district, to me at the CISMA. Just let somebody know that you've seen something. And lastly, something I want to talk about that's kind of new in the forestry side of things is non-native Phragmites. We do have native Phragmites. This picture on the right-hand side of this slide is a really great juxtaposition between the two. Is on the right, we have native, and you can see it's very low growing. It blends into the other vegetation. It's a different color, and it's what I call playing nice with other native plants that are supposed to be in our ecosystems. Whereas on the left-hand side of the picture, it is non-native Phragmites, and it is bigger, it is taller, it is much more tightly packed. And this is the one that really causes issues when it gets into different habitats, and it really likes wetland habitats. And as we're finding more and more over the last bit of time, how important our wetlands really are to stormwater mitigation, floodwater mitigation, holding on to sediment, holding on to pollutants. We really want to leave our wetlands as pristine as possible. So this species is a really big troublemaker in that area. And as you can see in that left-hand part of the photo, it really just crowds out other beneficial wetland species and crowds out just about anything else that's going to be growing there and can cause some serious problems. And so normally we're looking for this in our coastal zones, true wetlands, but what we've been finding recently, and actually very much so thank you to some loggers and foresters that have been pointing this out and getting to know this species more, is that it's coming into some sites where we aren't really thinking to be looking for it until these last couple years. It's come into cedar swamps after a cedar harvest. And then it came in, this right-hand side picture is along the new trail system that was made at a property after a logging harvest. And there's lots of different factors at play. As you can see, we're on four-wheelers in the right-handed photo. So is it the recreation vehicles? A lot of times these corridors and these trails open up brand new wildlife corridors. So it might be moving with that. But it also is potentially, if you're out there and you're not sure what this plant is and you do a cedar harvest and there was some Phragmites there, it could possibly also move around on some machinery. So as I've been saying over and over through this talk, knowing what things are and knowing what is where is a huge step into managing and keeping invasives in place where we can keep track of them, manage them, and hopefully not be spreading them around too much. But it's a lot of factors at play. And as mentioned, we are just starting to be more and more aware of this maybe being a problem species when we're trying to look at inland wetlands and inland forest stands. So, big old slide on how to do decontamination. So moving on with some key terms, we are talking about vectors. And vectors is the physical means by which an invasive species is transported. And so your vector can be your boots, your vehicles, your equipment. It could also be wildlife. It could be birds. It could be deer. And then pathways is the specific route that the vector has to take. So an example to use both of them is we're using vehicles and equipment to do forest inventory and site prep. So your vector and your pathway are going hand in hand there, and those are different ways that invasive species can get latched on and move around if we're not too careful and not know maybe some ways that they can be spread. And so basic decontamination doesn't have to be difficult, and that's kind of the key, is that we want it to be easy. We want it to be things that it can be integrated into your basic routine when you're out in the woods doing your job and doing all your planning. It shouldn't take you more than hopefully 5 or 10 minutes with very minimal specialized equipment. And some basic decontamination protocols has been found to remove up to 88% of attached seeds and plant matter. And so that extra 10 minutes at the end of your day before you're leaving a site can really, really go a long way in keeping invasive species from moving around the landscape. And what could that look like? I know it's definitely a little bit more difficult to hose off your big tracked vehicle there, but getting all that mud off of there before you're moving that guy to a job site would be huge. How much plant material could potentially be stuck in that mud, and moving that around, leaving that at the site when the equipment moves is a huge step in making sure that anything that's in that mud isn't going to your new job site. This top right corner has been my vehicle more than twice. You're going through tall brush, you're going through a whole bunch of fun off-roaded stuff. If you have any plant matter that gets stuck in your vehicle, just take 2 minutes before you leave the site, get it all cleared off, and continue on your day. If you're able to get a pressure washer and hose off things at each site, that's wonderful. I know that's not accessible at a lot of places, but that is probably the best case scenario. And then don't forget your boots. The bottoms of your shoes and your boot treads can hold a lot of material. And so kicking off your boots, having a boot brush handy, and again, leaving all of that dirt and debris at the site you're about to leave will leave anything you picked up there. And so this is a graphic that is recommended decontamination for heavy equipment. The air cleaners and the radiator grills and the engine and the air intake can all potentially get something like Phragmites, has big floofy seed heads, and so that can easily get stuck in air filters and potentially move with you. Obviously all the tracks on the tracked vehicles, we saw that mud, getting that off of there might be helpful. And same with the boom and the buckets and all that fun attachments. And again, I'm very cognizant of the fact that you can't do this at every, stop and go point along your whole job. But if it is feasible to start building in, it's a really great way to leave things in place and leave things out of sight and not move it to new sites. For vehicles, as in the picture before, if there's vegetation hanging right in your wheel well, just yank that off and leave it on the ground there. And, make sure that if your floor mats are getting really muddy, you're not just, shaking them out someplace brand new and some more dirt, because you're potentially also shaking out some seeds that were on your boots with that. Your radiator grill can get stuff stuck in it plenty of times. I've personally seen that. And tires can obviously get really muddy too. And then lastly, us, when we're just walking around through the woods, we're carrying a lot of stuff with us, whether it's burrs, whether it's muddy boots that potentially have seeds in that mud. And, if there's seeds stuck to your pant legs or to other parts of you, just taking a quick moment to just inspect and remove anything you can visibly see can go a long, long way in leaving invasive plants in place. And these are little boot brushes, and if anybody is ever interested in getting one, I have a ton. I can give them out to you. I keep like one in my backpack, one in my car, one in my field crew's car. Everybody having one of these, it's a really handy way just to easily pick some dirt and mud out of your shoes. And so some additional methods and tools that are hopefully really easy. A car wash with an undercarriage spray, if you can get to a car wash quickly after you leave your field site, works really, really well. If you can flush or pressure wash, that's great. And if you can get a heated pressure washer, that's the best. That will just ensure that you're truly decontaminating any of that equipment and ensuring that you're not carrying things potentially to new locations. And so for some further resources, if anybody needs some more information, the Play Clean Go campaign focuses exactly on everything I just said. You play, you work, you hunt, you fish, then you clean, then you go. That's their entire slogan summarized right there. And so they have a lot of resources on how to do that decontamination based on your activity on their website and on their campaign trail. As I mentioned, the Missing webpage is great for IDing things. So if you're doing all the cleaning and everything, but you're still not sure maybe what's out in the landscape, you can go there for ID help and those distribution maps. The CISMA and myself, I'm a resource. If you have questions and you want some help, or you want to do a site visit to see what might be someplace before you're getting going on some management, I'd be happy to do any of that with you. Same with your local conservation districts, your conservation district forester, the district managers there. They're very knowledgeable in a lot of the invasive species present in their region. Regional foresters at every level, whether they're with private, consulting foresters, or they're, DNR has foresters, the Forest Service has foresters. So regional foresters, you're out there trekking these woods all day, every day. You know what's on the ground. So those are really great resources to talk to each other and see what's happening as well. And with that, I'm actually done. So I'm not sure where we were on time, and if we had time for questions, Matt, I'd be happy to take them. I have my contact information up there as well. So if anybody had questions that they think of after this, I'm more than happy to stay in touch.
Fantastic. Thank you, Elise. You got us back on track mostly, but we definitely have time for some questions. So we will open up the floor to any live questions, or else type a chat in the chat box and we'll get to you.
Hey, Matt, this is Dennis here out of Marquette County. Something I wanted to pass along that our foresters have been seeing more and more of is actually city brush that's being hauled out in the woods. Last fall, we picked up a lot of garbage bags, seeing a lot of mountain ash, roses. I mean, you name it, we've been seeing it. So I don't know where we're at on, I guess passing that along to the community of the importance to not be carrying their yard brush and debris out in the woods and dumping it. but we've definitely seen an increase year after year of that occurring.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the comment there, Dennis. I know that's an issue, especially around my area where I live in Ishpeming. We have a lot of Norway maple, and boy, is there a huge seed bank for those things in the fall. So, yeah, we'll definitely consider maybe putting out some outreach in addition to what we're doing today for the public. Thanks.
Yeah, Dennis, thank you. That's really good to know. That's actually a huge vector that the CISMA looks for is household waste. And I can't tell you how many times I've been in the woods and I see vinca vine growing out in the middle of the woods because people dump their landscaping clippings, their household plants if they don't want them anymore. So thank you for the notice that that's on the uptick. And I definitely agree with Matt that maybe we'll focus some more outreach on that. We don't want to see things getting into the woods that aren't supposed to be there.
Perfect. Yep. Okay, definitely have a few more minutes. We'll leave it open to some more live questions or type something in the chat box, folks. Okay, I guess not too many other questions coming in, so we can maybe move right along. If you have a question that we're not addressing, definitely type it in the chat box. We'll get to you, and we'll also have some time at the end.